What's good, cannabis investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis news from June 10th to the 16th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it helps out my channel. And if you want to learn more about this investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. While there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with, try to think of these videos as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US cannabis industry, identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth a lot more in the future than they are now, based on their current market caps, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And as always, there's never a dull moment in the roller coaster world of cannabis, and so we're going to start with some state updates first that will matter coming later this year. Hirsch Jane, thank you for this. As of June 14th, reported first by the Columbus Dispatch, 130 new dispensaries could open in Ohio to sell rec cannabis through their existing medical outlets. And so I'll put the link to that article in the comments, but he does summarize it essentially here. As of noon on Friday, the division received 219 total license applications for med operators that want dual licenses. Officials granted preliminary approval, 8 so far, only to facilities that so far are cultivating, processing, and testing. So obviously we're waiting on actual retail dispensaries to get that. And I did say June 20th when Ben prompted people to guess what day sales would actually start. And so I'm hoping I'm still right on that. I'd love to get a GTI hat, but companies submitted 134 applications for new additional dispensaries, I believe, on top of this. And so no retail outlets are selling it yet, but it does seem that the ball is rolling in Ohio. And on top of that, thank you, Hirsch, for even more detail, highlighting that the situation will likely only improve and it will be a state similar to Missouri or Maryland post-launch. So worth remembering, most of urban Ohio will have several shops within 30 minutes. Most of rural Ohio will be 1 hour or less away from a shop, while people in greater Indianapolis, Lexington, Louisville, so Indiana or Kentucky, will also be 90 minutes away or less. And so this map comes from this article, newsbreakapp.com. Where will the dispensaries be? This is available here if you wanted to grab it in the link and check it out. But definitely looking towards the next few weeks to see when these adult use dispensaries or these existing dispensaries turn on and become adult use. And so on top of that, last one from Ohio, the size of MSOs, Ohio cultivation and production facilities. For anyone that is interested, all the MSOs that do have cultivation and grow currently in Ohio, obviously sets them up very nicely for when that flip switches to adult use sooner than later. And so unfortunately we got a sad update out of New Hampshire, and it just sucks for the people there that the politicians screwed them over again, as breaking, the New Hampshire House just voted against HB 1633, the rec cannabis legalization bill, and so it's now been defeated for another year. It sucks to be someone that wants legal access to cannabis and is willing to vote with their dollars in New Hampshire. Well, I had to share this pep talk from Kim, as it is a milestone for True Leaf, no doubt, to be opening their 200th store across the country. Number 200 happens to land in Florida as well, where they currently dominate, and so hence why she's put so much money, $40 million, into lobbying for the female cannabis plant to legally be sold, titled as adult use cannabis, through dispensaries and whatnot. Obviously, we've learned that there are some obstacles in the way, much like Ron DeSantis and the hemp industry, him trying to pit the hemp industry and the male plant against the female plant in the legal cannabis industry, trying to get funding from the hemp industry. So it is a shit show and a mess that none of us really anticipated. But I still think that we're all going to have our day in time, and so just going to play Kim, basically keeping our hopes high and making us look onward.
Reality to provide access. And with that, we are at a pivotal point in Florida history right now. And I think it's so interesting.
It's true.
And kind of karma, I guess.
Isn't it fun?
The fact that we are here opening our 200th store at the precipice of what could be the next wave of, the end to prohibition, and for it to happen here in the state of Florida. So here's the reality, y'all. Number one, no one should be in jail. No one should be arrested. No one should fear getting arrested for personal possession of cannabis in the state of Florida.
Obviously.
Freaking done, okay? That is what Amendment 3 does. So you're going to hear a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of points, counterpoints. Our governor just this week was talking about, that there's going to be 20 joints in front of elementary schools. I don't know. I mean, maybe alongside the grocery cart full of liquor that
Imagine the nerve and self-awareness that Ron DeSantis must lack to spew such bullshit, but he doesn't care because he's not going to face any consequences because politicians don't. All that to point out that the policies that he's clearly for, synthetic derived garbage THC from the male cannabis plant, and what he's against, the actual medicinal female cannabis plant, which all the studies on PubMed are built around. Clearly, any joint showing up at elementary schools would be the synthetic garbage crap being sold at gas stations that he is a proponent of. So you can't make this shit up, and no doubt it just makes things more complicated as it increases the competition, and we don't necessarily know how this will play out, but there's certainly going to be an impact, and all of these stores in Florida, once adult use flips, are going to make a ton of money. Now, obviously, we love seeing this recap. True Leaf dominating with 136, Verano 75 stores, then Air with 64, and Pure Leaf 62. While it is true that November 5th cannot come soon enough so we can get the results, adult use would not go into effect until, say, August 2025. So we do got to keep that in mind. Plan accordingly for your own situation, folks. But I still have no doubt that the people of Florida will be Florida men and vote for cannabis and get that 63% majority they need. Well, unfortunately, House GOP strips language aimed at protecting banks from cannabis crackdowns. So we always appreciate you, Don, especially that little dose of hopium we needed last week. But unfortunately, our boy Dave Joyce did not come through, as the language to protect all financial institutions and not differentiating them from like depositories and then financial institutions, yada yada. Unfortunately, that language was stripped, noted that some of his colleagues had taken issue with the legislation. And so, of course, while SAFE always looks promising, it's always the carrot dangled that gets yanked at the last minute. So none of us were holding our breaths. We were expecting that. It's as if there's only one way for cannabis reform to actually happen that doesn't involve Congress. And remember, it's in progress. We just have to be patient. As, of course, the publicly revealed OLC opinion side of a proposed rule is about as rare as it gets. So thank you, Do the Right Thing, for reminding us that. And it's an opinion that defends cannabis reform to Schedule 3. Congress is useless. We're all learning that, and I'm sure we will never forget that lesson. Good thing the executive branch isn't useless. And so just a reminder, all, 37 days left to comment. We have 17,835 comments so far. I imagine, again, since even last week we looked at it, or 2 weeks prior, 97% were positive, and for cannabis being rescheduled, obviously, it should be descheduled outright. But hey, if you have not commented, link below to do so. Well, worth highlighting that this was published in The Guardian. We love the awareness, as the DA plans to reclassify cannabis, right? This plan is in action. What does this mean for local dispensaries? Well, if nothing changes, it means people continue to die, unfortunately. Which we'll get to in a moment. But the main thing, hey, that we're all hopeful for as investors, because this is going to mean more money in the companies that we've invested in, changing the status quo for the better. The one concrete advantage for dispensaries would be a reduced tax burden. He says that Section 280E of the tax code dictates if you're trafficking any Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drug, then you cannot take business deductions. If cannabis becomes a Schedule 3 substance, then that problem basically goes away for the industry. But the other biggest reality that continues because of fucking schmuck and he will not pass SAFE, similar to those House GOP retards taking it out, yeah, the fact that people still cannot access financial services is the reason there's so much crime, or it incentivizes criminals to rob these dispensaries knowing they're flooded with cash and product that they can quickly sell for cash. And sadly, because of this, the death toll continues to rise over time, and there's no other industry like the cannabis industry in the US that faces discrimination, doesn't seem to be given a shit about, and we can directly put the blood on the hands of Schmuck Schumer and incompetent politicians who have stalled on the Safer Banking Act since it was introduced over a decade ago. Like, you cannot make this shit up. So we know who to blame, and while we appreciate you, Don, for helping humanize these corrupt, incompetent criminals, it's just, they just keep dangling the carrot when in reality they're screwing over Americans worse and worse by the year, and we just got to rely on the executive branch to keep their dang word. But why I'm still optimistic, this is a little piece of an interview that Pablo had with some apparently legal and industry experts. All that to say is they do anticipate a new Cole memo to come from now until the election as well, on top of the news of Schedule 3 going into place and becoming a reality. So let's just play this clip.
There are at least a couple pieces of legislation that are still coming together.
And I will admit, I don't know this guy's name. So
that they may try to move in June or July. Now, after that period, things get very, very difficult. And then we'd be looking at the lame duck period, which we have tried the lame duck strategy multiple times before, and we've not been able to get over some leadership hurdles.
And by the way, he's been talking about SAFE for the last 30 seconds.
2024 could be different for us.
Really?
I still think we stand a very, very decent chance of getting that bill done before the end of this year. Now, if we don't, then yes, you are correct that I think the next Congress is going to make it's going to be easier for us if, in fact, cannabis has ended up on Schedule 3. It's going to be a much easier sell. This is a public safety bill, pure and simple. It's why it's bipartisan. And we have Republicans and Democrats that have embraced this for years. It's been kicking around for 10 years. It's time to pass this thing and pass it now. And hopefully we can get some of the additional cleanup measures in the financial services sector.
This is where it gets good, though.
As John and I both have talked about on this discussion, through the reissuance of a new cannabis memorandum. I'm going to start calling it that instead of Cult 2.0.
Okay.
A new cannabis memorandum.
All right, I like it.
Listen to a bit more because I recalled that the individual went into more detail about the memorandum, but I think I'm wrong because he did not. Clearly, he's not the one writing it. And so if you wanted to grab that link, it is in the comments to listen to it. And at the same time, I'll try to get the name of that guy because it helps my credibility if I know who I'm referencing. The main point is a legal expert or an industry expert, he seems to think we're going to get a memorandum as well, mainly because SAFE hasn't come because Congress is useless. But more importantly, to think the executive branch would go through all of that process, especially asking for economic feedback on the potential rescheduling, and then not sort of help out the financial services industry and give them what they've wanted, lobbying for SAFE for how long, and then trying to get that cash into banks as they've wanted that for a long time. I just don't necessarily see how Schedule 3 does not come with a new memorandum. And I could be wrong. So let me know what you think in the comments, but I'm just sharing my 2 cents, obviously, because it's my channel. And so with that, Thomas George highlighting something that many people might not be aware of. As cannabis investors do have the biggest diamond hands, I would say that I agree with that, as units outstanding have continued to climb despite the brutal tape. So think of it this way. The light blue line is, of course, the share price, and it's been hell watching this, especially if you got in around this point in time, and you've been just continuing to watch this happen. Hence why I stay away from ETFs, and I always invest in the underlying business that I believe in and that I keep an eye on and keep tabs on, that hopefully will reflect in the stock price in time based on what the business is actually doing on the ground. All that to point out, though, it seems as if this is unit accumulation and people continue to buy knowing that, price and the company are not the same thing. But at some point in time, value does usually get recognized, and hence why we seem to have a lot of buyers in low ranges preparing for what's next to come. And so take from that what you will. Again, I'm an amateur investor looking at a stock chart and saying my thoughts, so take that with a grain of salt. But worth considering from MSOX, good tweet. Wow, big 20.7% drop in MSOS short positions in the latest update. Noting that from May 15th to May 31st, we saw a reduction in short interest by about 4 million shares. Now, shouldn't that mean that the price will go up if short interest goes down? I don't understand how this all works. I'm just trying to point out what we can see on Shortdata.ca. So if we do go to larger short positions and we go to the Canadian Securities Exchange, we can see a big reduction in at least Green Thumb and Trulieve, which are, if anything, the most fundamentally healthy companies with the best balance sheets. And so that's likely why shorts would be focusing on them first and foremost, and that's likely why Cresco is still being held down so low. As a bag holder, that's something I pay attention to. But last one, on that note from SammyJ, a few reminders. I do not believe it is retail selling, and I do believe people are buying, as when I look on my phone app and I zoom out, the volume, which has picked up since the start of this year, seems to be crazy. Does that mean anything? I don't know. But 99.9% of MSOS underlying market caps didn't trade yesterday. This isn't capitulation or retail panic, which I would agree with because I haven't sold a damn share. I've still got my dime in hands. According to Sammy, this is sell programs into no bid. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. Sammy has a lot more experience with algorithms and trading infrastructure and finance than I do. And so, great point though, doesn't make it less painful, just context for what it's worth. And so, take from that what you will. All I can do is share context with you. And all I know is that if there are no buyers right now, that's fine with me. There might be sellers, and those people can eat the opportunity cost if they choose so. The main thing is that I will continue to accumulate cash in hopes that even from now until, say, September, I get the opportunity to average down on the cusp of Schedule 3 actually coming into effect. Because if there are no buyers right now, you know that there will be once that memorandum drops and once Schedule 3 happens. Because it's just going to be a replay of March 2020 to September 2020 into December 2020 to Feb 2021 this year through an election. I'm going to call it right now. I'm very happy to say that because I've seen it happen before, and there's no doubt that the stage is set for it to happen again. And so I'm planning accordingly for my own situation. Whatever you do is up to you. So that's not advice. With that, just to highlight that this fuckery happens and it's not anything new, Anson funds to pay $2.25 million for secret short seller relationship as of June 12th, so very fresh. And if you've watched my channel for a long time, this isn't the first time you've heard of Anson Funds, a Canadian hedge fund, taking advantage of naked short selling in Canada where it's legal and being sued by the SEC. After reading through this, I think it's worth making the distinction that there are two different Anson funds. And so, according to the SEC order, the Dallas-based Anson Funds Management LP will pay a civil penalty of $1.25 million, and Toronto-based Anson Advisors Inc. has agreed to a $1 million penalty. And so, more details here. It just leads you to understand that this definitely happens, and somehow, some way, that Dallas-based fund and then their subsidiary, likely in Canada, are taking advantage of the opportunity of these unfortunate companies being stuck on the over-the-counter market. And the other reason why this is just funny is that I recall Namaste Technologies as a stock I bought when I began investing and didn't know the first thing about it. I had success in my first week buying Aurora Cannabis, and then it doubled a week later, and I should have held on for months, but I didn't. And then I saw Namaste had a green day, and I was like, oh, I'll put $400 into them, and of course blew that. And so you live and you learn. You always got to look back, though, and be able to laugh at yourself, because otherwise then you don't learn. But with that, on to some studies from NORML, as Americans far more likely to report secondhand harms from alcohol than from cannabis. No shit, as it's been the gateway drug all along. But data published last week in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs finds that adults are more than 6 times more likely to acknowledge having experienced secondhand harms because of someone else's drinking than they are to report having faced similar harms as a result of other people's cannabis use. So more here if you wanted to pause to read the breakdown, but it looked like the sample size was 7,799 Americans age 18 and up. Respondents were more likely 34.2% to report having experienced secondhand harms from others or probably their own use of alcohol, and more likely their own, while they were least likely 5.5% to report secondhand harms from someone else's use of cannabis. Obviously, because it doesn't bother anybody else unless their nose is sensitive and they can't handle a bit of a smell. But with that, from Nature Mental Health, as of June 3rd, assessing rates and predictors of cannabis-associated psychotic symptoms across observational, experimental, and medical research. Now, note that these findings, I think, are quite important for the distinction I try to make between the female cannabis plant that's actually the medicine that we find referenced in all these studies versus the synthetic garbage, fake THC cannabis that's going around derived from the male cannabis plant because of the farm loophole. And so, abstract, cannabis, one of the most widely used psychoactive substances worldwide, can give rise to acute cannabis-associated psychotic symptoms. So, researchers like to claim. Obviously, we like to debunk that. Now, what's interesting, though, in this study, and we found that rates of CAPS, or cannabis-associated psychotic symptoms, varied substantially across the study designs. So, the design of the study, how it is framed, seems to have a big role on what the outcome is. Given the high rates reported by observational and experimental research, 19 and 21% respectively, but not medicinal cannabis studies, only 2%. So isn't it fascinating that so few instances of psychosis are reported when the studies are done medicinally and focused on the actual medicinal substance versus researchers that, are coming to their conclusions really based on however they frame the experiment or however they determine their observations. Now, I could be wrong in how I'm interpreting this. Let me know in the comments, but I would say the results reinforce the need to more closely monitor adverse cannabis-related outcomes in vulnerable individuals, as these individuals may benefit most from harm reduction efforts and mainly just getting access to the safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative that many Americans already have access to. Well, from Do the Right Thing, I forget which story this is. Oh, yes, mentioning how Fox is speaking highly of cannabis for once, which we love to see. Just watched this Fox Cannabis segment from the last couple days. Very positive towards Schedule 3. Now, I'm not going to play this because I don't want to make the video too long. Of course, you can read a snippet here. It's that there is credible scientific support for the use of cannabis in the treatment of pain, anorexia, nausea, vomiting. Of course, we can add to that list. It goes on, but these two links I will put in the comments for anyone that wants to go through those. Well, last study, cannabis use fizzles with Colorado teens. Another update that we love, and this is what shuts the prohibitionist rate up. The rate of current cannabis use among Colorado teens is in decline since the state legalized cannabis for adults and remains lower than the national average. You'd love to hear that. The survey finds that 12.8% of high school students in Colorado reported using cannabis in the past 30 days, down from 13.3% in 2021. This also represents a nearly 42% decrease since 2011, the year prior to the legalization of cannabis for adults 21 and older in Colorado. And so try and tell me that cannabis reform or ending prohibition doesn't work, at least for reducing youth use, because the data speaks for itself. Anyone telling you otherwise is an idiot and has not looked at the new data. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, while there is an interactive website or map that I pulled up, and I'll put those links in the comments, but main thing I wanted to show you is if we can compare alcohol to cannabis, why not? And so let's see what's more of a gateway drug. 2023, select the health topic alcohol, percentage of students who had at least one drink of alcohol on one or more of the past 30 days. And I just want to focus on this box right here, 15 years or younger, 16 years old, 17 years old, or 18 years old. And so we see 14.5, 15 years or younger, 21.1%, 16 years. Let's compare to cannabis and percentage of students who use cannabis one or more times during the past 30 days. Alcohol, again, 14.5. That is a big jump ahead of 8.9% there. Now, 16 years old, 13.7% used cannabis at least once compared to 21.1% of 16-year-olds who used alcohol at least once in the last 30 days. 17 years old, in the last 30 days, 28.4% consumed alcohol, 18.2% consumed cannabis at 17 years old. While lastly, at 18 years old or older, 17.1%, even less than 17-year-olds actually consumed cannabis once or more in the last 30 days compared to 31.2% of 18-year-olds. And so the data doesn't lie. It speaks for itself. Where I get a little bit hesitant is that if we actually go deeper into what some of these people think, they think it's fine to call 20% of the population cisgender, when if you call me cis male, I'm going to smack you in the face because I'm a male. Because it is what it is. There's only two sexes. And the fact that any of them buy into this crap too makes me just think, okay, because, you know, people determine your identity, not necessarily you. Anyways, rant over. Just pointing all that out because, damn, just as much as we think we're seeing progress in these leftist states, we're certainly not. We're creating even... There are bigger issues being created that we need to even deal with than ending cannabis prohibition. But it starts with that, I think, in a weird way, getting people out of whatever narrow bubble that they fixated themselves in so long and helping them wake up. But with that, the Dank Informer, great question posing as an investor. I'd really like to know, Ben, because we haven't gotten an answer yet. Are these products counterfeit, or is Green Thumb, Incredible's brand, legally licensed by the Herb Hemp Company, which sells gummies and vapes packed with chemically derived cannabinoids? And so, unfortunately, Ben did not answer directly, though thank you, the Dank Informer. And if anyone is more interested in learning about this topic and the synthetic alternatives, he's been doing deeper dives and going to actual gas stations in the US, so I'd recommend following him. But he does point out down here that... Or Blake Walker, thank you for tweeting this. Read the 10K. It's disclosed that they've started to license and sell hemp-derived products. And this is from Green Thumb's 10K, apparently. So hemp-derived products that exceed the limits in the Farm Bill are federally illegal. Although currently not a material part of our business, we have begun producing or licensing third parties to produce Farm Bill-compliant hemp products. So great find, Blake Walker. And hey, shit, I do agree that if you can't beat them, join them. But at the same time, this is a tough situation to get yourself into. That is for sure. Well, I wanted to share this, the Trade to Black podcast with the CanTrip CEO and some general cannabis stock news. I forget the guy's name, Adam Terry. He seems like an intelligent guy. He seems to also get that we don't want to just allow these synthetics to run rampant, and he's not necessarily a proponent of all the synthetics that might have unintended psychological consequences, but he's certainly for descheduling and realizes that there can be room for both industries, and it's just an interesting chat. So if anyone wants to tune in, that link will be in the comments. But with that, on to MSO news. As we carry through, the Cannabist company continues Virginia expansion with the opening of Cannabis Richmond. The 11th dispensary for them in Virginia expands access to quality cannabis products for those who need a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read about what the Cannabist has going on in Virginia. Well, Air Wellness reported this on the 10th, on Monday early this week. They secured real estate financing for a new Florida indoor cultivation facility, which no doubt they're happy about because this will help gear them up and prepare them for August of 2025 next year when adult use is actually going to go into effect. And so under the terms of the agreement, Air is leasing a 16-acre property comprising of 145,000 square feet of industrial space in Ocala, Florida from IIPR. Air plans to redevelop a 98,000 square foot building within the property to serve as a regulated cannabis cultivation facility. IIP has committed to funding Air up to $30 million for the construction. So take from that what you will. It definitely seems like they're getting investment at a decent cost now that will reap rewards in the future when adult use is flowing through their doors. While TerraSend celebrates opening of the Apothecarium Nottingham, Maryland dispensary, prime location features a convenient drive-through and an expanded floor plan. So good to see TerraSend continuing to focus on what they can control, opening up more shops in markets, especially like Maryland, that are booming right now. So more here if you wanted to pause to read on what TerraSend is doing there. Well, on to some state news. Thank you, Dennis Ruda, for sharing this. As New Jersey's cannabis market excels, as New York continues to face setbacks. And so, obviously, what could excel more if you'd open more shops? Happy to report, though, that during the cannabis holiday of 420, sales soared with New Jersey residents purchasing over $4 million worth of products on April 19th and further climbing to more than $5.2 million on April 20th alone. Total sales for the weekend reached $12.5 million. Seems pretty pathetic when you consider what other states have done. There's a bit more about New York's ongoing challenges here if you wanted to pause to read, but I've got more on New York for y'all. Now, not going to spend too much time on it, but just the headline updates as I've been reporting on this shit show of a state and how the regulators purposely botched their program. And so now the higher-ups are forced to kind of show their fangs and make some moves. But New York Cannabis Board formally adopts final Homegrow rules. The regulations were approved preliminarily in February, but had been subject to a 60-day comment period that did not begin until late March because everything takes longer than usual in New York. And yeah, unfortunately, I can't scroll down on this either. But anyone interested in how the Homegrow rules might be implemented in New York, you can grab this link. But more from those higher up, and Hochul getting in shit for the incompetent people that she hired that did very little for very long. State cannabis officials repeatedly raised alarms to Hochul's team over private equity loan deal. Did they? Well, why didn't Hochul's team listen? Because they don't fucking give a shit. Of course, internal emails show. Well, that's not a good look. Obviously, Hochul ought to be gone, as should everyone else in the Office of Cannabis Management in New York. Staffers red-flagged inflated costs and default risks for startup retailers, but were largely ignored by top officials under pressure to get financing flowing. Now, how true is this? I don't know. Written by Rosalind Adams, who we're going to feature a little bit more in a moment. And so, time will tell. But obviously, once word comes out that the people doing a lot of the work, obviously, Hochul's not doing her work. It's the people below her that she pays to do all the work. If they're actually willing to bite the hand that feeds them now, that's fucking interesting. So, this is bad, wrote Matt Greenberg. I would not advise them to sign this, but they did anyways. And so, now New York is facing the consequences, reaping what they've sowed. More here if you wanted to pause to read or grab the link to go through more. But on top of that, see, now more state senators call for investigation of cannabis fund after reading the city expose. So, state senators Liz Kruger and Gustavo Rivera now dragged into it. Obviously, not a good look from what Hochul's finally getting exposed for now too. Also demanded the state cease making loans through Chicago Atlantic as of right now. And that's obviously, I pointed this out a year ago of how predatory and essentially it was legal extortion what they were trying to pull here. And make whole those trapped in the predatory deal. Because essentially Chicago Atlantic, a company based not even in New York, was making the funds directly to the Office of Cannabis Management, making the loans directly to them, and then it was the Office of Cannabis Management taking that money and then basically allocating those loans to whoever they felt deemed worthy, when it was like, why on earth are you taking that cut? That should not be a thing. That's predatory, let alone the rates they're likely getting. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read. Lots of detail on these stories as well, of course. I know I'm just kind of touching the surface, but it's because I've kind of went through all of these and what has led up to these developments over the last however many years since they legalized in 2021. And so Rosalind Adams, good job exposing the story. And so this is the statement from Senators Liz Kruger and Gustavo Rivera. Following her investigation, state senators call for the $200 million New York Social Equity Cannabis Investment Fund, which was a farce of extortion in the first place, to cease issuing loans, an OIG investigation, and all licensees trapped in predatory loan deals to be made whole. Basically get them out of there and give them that equal access to opportunity, not bullshit equity that New York has falsely promised all along. And so it's not only New York feeling the pain this past week. This was an article that came out in the LA Times. They just released an article exposing a bunch of weed brands in Cali, and this is not a good look for them, of course, because if we jump over to the article, which I was able to read once yesterday, but I can't now, unfortunately, I guess I can read it now. I can't read it now. But the idea was that I think they tested 42 some products, legal vapes and legal pre-rolls, and they did find a lot of unfortunate stuff in legal products that is being sold through legal dispensaries. And so, hey, maybe this is why we can't have nice things. While we'd expect anyone going through all the legal hurdles to follow the legal rules, clearly that's not the case. And so to anyone out there in California, if you've used any of these products, maybe you want to consider not using them. Now, worth noting that this is just page 24 and 25 of 26, a 26-column spread of every product that they tested. Now, it's worth noting that not every product failed the test as well. And so if you were to grab the article and go through the 26 columns, it's fascinating, but there are going to be many companies on there that pass the test, and so that you can feel good about continuing to buy their products. However, any of those that got exposed, obviously a terrible look. Don't want to be them, but hey, you reap what you sow. Don't put shitty additives into your products. No shit. While California Cannabis Industry Association, I found this, a white paper titled Pandora's Box. Now, this is not anything related to selling unsafe products through legal outlets. That's more of just that LA Times article that dropped on Friday. But this is a white paper talking on the dangers of a national, unregulated, hemp-derived intoxicating cannabinoid market, which we currently have, thanks to Mitch McConnell, the godfather of legal hemp and legal, unsafe, synthetic, untested cannabis, which we have rampant right now. And so you can go through this article, of course, if you're interested. Just figured I would share it because it popped into my feed before starting this, and the giant loophole for intoxicating hemp that is masquerading as cannabis that Sam and other propagandists are likely using as a reference, calling it the same cannabis that you find sold medicinally or in adult use dispensaries, which for the most part, we know it's not. It's important to make that distinction. With that last few stories, MJ Biz Daily out of Massachusetts, mold scandal leads to $200K fine for cannabis MSO. And all this tells me is that, hey, the regulated cannabis market is working, because if someone does create a product or sell a product that's unsafe, like any other industry, there's going to be recall, they're going to be held consequences, and they're going to be fined as a deterrent from them hopefully doing it again. And so this time it was Holistic Industries, $200K after a mold outbreak in which the company allegedly knowingly sold contaminated cannabis. That's unfortunate, and that seems like grounds for possibly taking their license away, but I guess best case scenario, maybe a $200K fine is also enough to hit them where it hurts so that they're not going to do it again. So just tells me that the legal regulated market is working, and that at least in Massachusetts, we got some regulators that are doing their job and catching product that shouldn't be out there. Fair enough. And so with that, a bit of a global tour from Al Jazeera. South Africa legalizes cannabis use. Will the rest of Africa follow? Well, that's obviously wishful thinking, but good to see South Africa making this change, as on the eve of May 27th, which saw the ruling African National Congress lose its majority for the first time in 30 years, a major change to the country's drug laws slipped through, barely noticed by most. Big win for public health. Just one day before the historic battle, President Cecil Ramaphosa signed the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, making South Africa the first African nation to legalize the use of cannabis. Now, has that created a legal market, commercial market for sales and whatnot? I guess we'll find that out. Remove cannabis from the country's own list of outlawed narcotics. Let's hope so, because this is a big step, similar to what Germany did and what the U.S. should do, outright descheduling. But it doesn't seem like there's any commercial market coming. Yeah, so it's more of like just decriminalizing like they did in Virginia. And so, like they did in Germany too. And now Germany's realizing, oh shit, we want to have a regulated commercial market to offset the black market. But yeah, it does not seem like there's any commercial market coming anytime soon. So I may have missed that, but let me know in the comments if I did. We'll update you if we get more news on that. Well, this is another big title, so take it with a grain of salt. Will the German cannabis market be worth $100 billion in the next 5 years? It won't be worth much if they don't create a commercial legal market to offset the black market, which they've clearly allowed to proliferate by decriminalizing and not creating a legal market for it. And so if they can eat away into that industry whatsoever by creating a new commercial market, then I think they could get anywhere closer to that number than they are now. But if they don't change that, not likely. And so obviously you can read through this if you're interested, but I basically just summarized what will get them to any more billion than they're at right now. And so last few before we head off, as always, links are in the comments for all stories mentioned, but from WeShoot 420, this is a reminder for anyone new, and I'm sure many of you are not new, you've just been painfully waiting and patiently like me. The cannabis market can stay inefficient longer than you can keep your mental sanity. It's a great quote. It plays off of, I think it's a Warren Buffett one or a Ben Graham one. Markets can stay insolvent longer than, or what is it? Markets can stay inefficient longer than you can stay solvent. I think that's the quote. Anyways, Very true. Our day is coming. It's just taking longer than we expected. Last few here from Jason Wild. We love to see him get more active because why be passive like you guys have been for the last 2 or 3 years? Let's get some fucking results. So Schmuck tweeting about how the Supreme Court is basically doing the job of Congress because Congress has become so fucking corrupt and incompetent they can't get shit done. So we're relying on the Supreme Court to make a lot of decisions that at least allow American principles and the idea of equal access to opportunity to stay in play, much like it would be ending cannabis prohibition, right? And so Schmuck continues to cry wolf while he is literally the one with blood on his hands, at least in the cannabis space. Wait till the Supreme Court legalizes weed because you won't. And that's still kind of my bingo wild card. I know that because the executive branch is what we can rely on and not Congress, we need to just wait for them to do their job. But if from now until then the Supreme Court just goes, yeah, of course, the Schedule 1 classification and the federal illegality is unconstitutional because states' rights. No shit. Because, 24, 25 states have already legalized. 38 have access to medical. It's just nonsense at this point. And so someone asked a great question down here. What happens if they win the lawsuit? It would not be considered illegal anymore if the licensees are following state law. Right now, the operators in Massachusetts, who are the plaintiffs in the suit, are following state law but are considered to be in violation of the Controlled Substances Act. This conflict would be fixed, and I wonder how this would affect the Farm Bill hemp loophole. I do not know, so let me know in the comments what you think. And just on top of it, it's really the same tweet, but I love that Jason Wild is starting to actually call out Schmuck because I've been calling him out for how long? And these old politicians, these actors that do a very good job raising money for the people that fund them, and as always at the expense of the average American person, especially those in the industry that were promised equal access to opportunity, who bought in believing the lip service and have since been fucked royally, unconsensually, and unconstitutionally by the old farts in Congress and many of the ideologically driven regulators in blue leftist states. And so you cannot make this shit up, but great question for anyone new to cannabis. Why is today a good day to enter with all the negativity surrounding the government and industry? According to Jason Wild, executive chairman of TSND, because while Schmuck can keep obstructing, now we've got the executive branch and the judicial branch set up to steal his virtue signal football from him, and we're done being passive. So I don't know when we're expecting a decision. All I can say is I love this attitude from Jason Wild. Keep it coming. And is this time different? What do you think? You tell me. Let me know in the comments. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.